I've always been the extra one. Not unwanted. Not ignored. Just underestimated. In my family, there were roles that seemed assigned before we were old enough to speak. My older brother was the leader. My sister was the favorite. And I was the youngest, the afterthought who was sweet, helpful, and too sensitive for big decisions. They said it casually, kindly, even. You wouldn't understand. Let the grown ones handle it. You're good at supporting, not leading. I learned early that arguing only confirmed their opinion of me. So I stopped. I watched instead. Family dinners were my first classroom. I noticed how decisions were already made before they were discussed. How my father's approval mattered more than logic. How my mother smoothed over tension with silence instead of solutions. And how my siblings spoke confidently, even when they were wrong. When I offered ideas, they smiled. Not cruelly, patiently. Like you smile at a child who thinks they've cracked an adult problem. So I learned to phrase my thoughts as questions. To let others take credit. To step back when the room is filled with louder voices. From the outside, it probably looked like insecurity. But it wasn't. It was observation. As we grew older, the pattern hardened. My brother took over conversations. My sister managed appearances. I handled the details no one wanted. Scheduling, paperwork, logistics, the unglamorous work that kept everything running. They called me reliable. Which was another way of saying invisible. I left home early. Built a life quietly. No dramatic success stories. No big announcements. Just steady progress. Whenever I visited, nothing had changed. Same jokes. Same assumptions. You're still so humble, my sister would say. You don't like stress, my brother added. I smiled. They mistook my calm for fragility. Then something happened. Not suddenly. Not loudly. But enough to crack the foundation they'd always stood on. A family issue surfaced. Financial at first, then legal, then emotional. Complicated. Urgent. Bigger than any one person. The kind of problem confidence alone can't fix. At first, they handled it the way they always did. My brother spoke. My sister controlled the narrative. My parents waited for reassurance. And everything began to unravel. That's when they started calling me. Not because they trusted me. Because they were running out of options. When I look back now, I can see the pattern forming long before any real conflict appeared. Even as kids, my siblings moved through the world like it belonged to them. My brother spoke first, decided first, acted first. He was praised for being bold. Mistakes were reframed as learning experiences. Confidence covered everything. My sister learned a different kind of power. She watched the reactions. Adjusted her tone. Knew exactly when to charm and when to withdraw. Adults trusted her instinctively. And me. I was the one asked to wait. To help clean up. To fetch things. To keep the peace. If there was an argument, I was told to be understanding. If there was tension, I was told not to add to it. So I became very good at reading rooms. At sensing when things were about to go wrong. I noticed when bills piled up on the counter long before anyone admitted money was tight. I noticed how my parents avoided certain conversations, how my siblings assumed responsibility without preparation. But no one asked what I thought. When I tried to contribute, my words were softened or dismissed. You're overthinking. It's not that serious. We've got it handled. That phrase followed me for years. We've got it handled. Until they didn't. The family issue began as something small, a shared asset, an agreement made too casually, paperwork no one fully reviewed. It grew quietly, like mold behind a wall. At first, it was just confusion. Then stress. Then late-night calls filled with frustration instead of certainty. My brother was angry. My sister was defensive. My parents were exhausted. I listened. Asked questions. Not pushy ones. Careful ones. And the more I listened, the clearer it became. They were reacting, not planning. Everyone was protecting their role instead of solving the problem. I could see the cracks forming. But I stayed silent. Not because I didn't know what to do. Because I knew they wouldn't hear it yet. The first time they asked for my opinion, it wasn't intentional. It slipped out in a moment of panic. "What would you do?" my mother asked, voice tired. The room went quiet. They all turned toward me like they'd forgotten I was there. I answered honestly, calmly, without drama. They nodded. Then my brother said, "That's interesting, but..." And the conversation moved on without me. I didn't interrupt. I just took note. Because something had shifted. For the first time, they'd asked. Even if they weren't ready to listen. The problem didn't explode all at once. It stretched. Dragged itself across weeks, then months, growing heavier each time it was mentioned. At first, it was framed as a temporary inconvenience. Something that just needed a bit of sorting out. My brother took control immediately. Phone calls, meetings, assertive emails written in a tone meant to signal authority. My sister handled the optics. She spoke to extended family. Reassured everyone that things were under control. Smiled through uncertainty. My parents watched all of it unfold with quiet concern, trusting that experience and confidence would be enough. And I watched something else. I saw deadlines being missed because no one wanted to admit confusion. I saw documents signed without full understanding. I saw emotional decisions dressed up as strategic ones. Every time I thought, asterisk this is where it will turn around, asterisk it didn't. Instead, the situation tightened. Stress changed people. My brother became louder. His confidence hardened into defensiveness. Any suggestion that questioned his approach felt like a challenge to his authority. My sister became sharper. She began correcting people mid-sentence, rewriting conversations after they happened, controlling information instead of clarifying it. And my parents. They started calling me late at night. Not to ask for solutions. Just to talk. To vent. To say the same things they couldn't say in front of my siblings. "I don't feel comfortable with how this is going. I'm worried we're missing something. I don't want this to tear the family apart." I listened. Asked questions. Not because I was trying to intervene, but because understanding mattered. Slowly, a picture formed. The issue wasn't just financial or legal. It was structural. Roles were assumed, not defined. Decisions were made emotionally, not strategically. No one wanted to pause long enough to map consequences. Except me. I started writing things down. Not as a plan. As a habit. Timelines. Names. Agreements. Gaps. I didn't share it. Not yet. Then came the first real consequence. A formal notice. Unexpected. Serious. The kind of thing that makes conversations stop mid-sentence. Suddenly, there were stakes. Voices rose. Accusations slipped out. "I told you we should've. You didn't explain that properly. This wouldn't be happening if..." No one looked at me. Until my father did. He didn't speak. He just watched me, like he was seeing something he'd missed before. That night, he called me alone. Asked me to explain what I thought was actually happening. I did. Slowly. Carefully. No blame. No ego. Just facts. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then he said, "Why didn't you say this earlier?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was uncomfortable. They hadn't been ready to hear it. And now they were starting to realize they might need more than confidence to survive what was coming. The weeks that followed felt heavier than anything before. The family didn't fall apart, not outwardly, but something fundamental shifted beneath the surface. Conversations became cautious. Decisions took longer. Confidence was replaced with something closer to anxiety. My brother still spoke the loudest, but his words no longer carried the same certainty. He repeated himself more. Asked for reassurance instead of giving it. My sister tightened her grip. Information flowed through her first, then out in carefully filtered pieces. She framed setbacks as misunderstandings, delays as strategy. But the results didn't match the narrative. And everyone could feel it. They started including me in discussions more often, not formally, not with acknowledgement, but subtly. I'd receive forwarded emails. I'd be copied on messages that had nothing to do with my role. It was quiet, tentative, as if they were testing whether involving me made things worse or better. I stayed exactly the same. I didn't push for authority, didn't correct people publicly. When I spoke, I asked questions that forced clarity. What's the actual deadline? Who's responsible for this part? What happens if this doesn't work? At first, my siblings answered defensively, then vaguely, then not at all. Because the questions exposed something they couldn't hide anymore. They didn't actually know. The pressure started leaking into personal moments. Family dinners grew tense. Conversations stopped when someone entered the room. Small disagreements escalated faster than they should have. One night, my brother snapped at me. "You always act like you know better," he said. "But you're never the one taking the risk." The room went silent. I looked at him, really looked. He was exhausted, frustrated, afraid. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. His confidence had never been about control. It had been about fear of losing it. I didn't argue. I said, "You're right. I don't take unnecessary risks." That wasn't the insult he expected. Because it was true. From that point on, things deteriorated faster. Another complication surfaced. Then another. Each one layered onto the last, making simple solutions impossible. The family reached a moment where denial could no longer protect anyone. And that's when the question came. Not casually. Not accidentally. Direct. "What do you think we should do?" my mother asked, voice shaking. Everyone turned to me. No interruptions. No dismissals. No smiling patience. Just expectation. I felt the weight of it. Not power, but responsibility. And I knew this moment mattered. Not because I wanted recognition, but because if I spoke now, everything would change. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I understood how fragile the moment was. This wasn't about having the right solution. It was about whether they were ready to let go of the story they'd been telling themselves for years. That the oldest knows best. That confidence equals competence. That I was meant to support, not lead. So I started where they couldn't argue. With facts. I laid out what I'd been tracking quietly for months. Timelines, agreements, missed checkpoints, inconsistencies no one had wanted to slow down enough to examine. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't frame it as correction. I framed it as clarity. "This is where things went off course," I said. "This is where assumptions replaced verification. And this is where we still have options." The room stayed quiet. Not tense. Focused. For the first time, they weren't reacting. They were listening. My brother leaned back, arms crossed, not defensively, but thoughtfully. My sister stopped taking notes and looked at me directly, like she was trying to recalibrate who I was in her mind. I proposed a restructuring. Not dramatic. Not risky. Slower decisions. Clear responsibility. External advice where emotion had clouded judgment. No shortcuts. It wasn't the kind of plan that makes people feel powerful. It was the kind that works. My father nodded slowly. "This makes sense," he said. No one contradicted him. That night, the dynamic shifted. Not fully, but enough. I became the one people checked with before making calls. The one asked to review documents before they were signed. The one who said, "Let's pause," and was taken seriously. The pressure didn't disappear. If anything, it grew. Because now, if this failed, it wouldn't just be their mistake. It would be associated with me. I felt that weight deeply. Every decision mattered. I double-checked everything. Asked uncomfortable questions. Delayed actions when something felt off. And there were moments, quiet ones, where I wondered if they'd revert. If my siblings would reclaim control once the situation stabilized. But something had changed in them too. They were tired of pretending. Tired of forcing certainty. They didn't say it out loud. But they trusted me. Not because I demanded it. Because I had earned it, slowly, invisibly. Over years they hadn't been paying attention. The plan didn't fail. But it came closer than I was comfortable admitting. There was a moment, a narrow one, where everything balanced on a single decision that couldn't be reversed once made. A deadline that had no extension. A document that would lock us into consequences we couldn't undo. Everyone felt it. The house became unusually quiet. Conversations shortened. People avoided eye contact, as if looking directly at the problem might make it worse. My brother hovered. He asked questions he'd never asked before, not out of curiosity, but fear. Are we sure this is the right move? What if they push back? What happens if we're wrong? My sister stopped controlling the narrative altogether. The confidence she once wore so easily no longer fit. She deferred to me openly now, sometimes without realizing she was doing it. What do you think? Should we wait? Is this too risky? I didn't answer impulsively. I took time. That alone felt unfamiliar to them, the willingness to pause instead of filling silence with certainty. I reviewed everything again. Every clause. Every implication. I slept poorly, replaying scenarios in my head, testing the plan from angles I knew they wouldn't think to examine. And then I saw it. A detail so small it had been overlooked repeatedly, not maliciously, just carelessly. A condition buried in fine print. A timeline that didn't align with the assumptions everyone had been operating under. If we moved forward as planned, it would cost us leverage we didn't even realize we had. If we adjusted now, we could change the outcome entirely. I called a meeting. No urgency in my voice. No panic. Just clarity. This changes things, I said, pointing to the detail they'd missed. If we proceed without addressing this, we lose control. My brother frowned, scanning the page. Then his expression shifted. He saw it. My sister went quiet. My father exhaled slowly, like someone who had been holding their breath for months. No one argued. We adjusted course. It wasn't flashy. It didn't feel triumphant. But it worked. The deadline passed without disaster. The pressure eased slightly, not gone, but manageable. The outcome stabilized in our favor. And that's when I noticed something that stayed with me. No one congratulated themselves. They looked at me. Not with relief. With recognition. Later that evening, my brother pulled me aside. I didn't see that coming, he admitted. I would have missed it. It wasn't an apology, but it was honest. And it mattered. I realized then that the family no longer saw me as the youngest. They saw me as the one who kept them from falling apart. The crisis didn't end with a celebration. There was no moment where everyone laughed and admitted they'd been wrong about me. Real life doesn't work that way. Instead, things settled. Slowly. Naturally. The issue that had threatened to fracture our family was resolved. Not perfectly, but responsibly. Damage was contained. Future risk minimized. Stability restored. And with that stability came something else. Silence. The kind that follows exhaustion. In the weeks after, my role didn't disappear. If anything, it became permanent. Decisions were routed through me. Questions were asked before actions were taken. Not because I insisted, but because it felt reckless not to. My siblings didn't announce their change in perspective. They just behaved differently. My brother listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was measured. He checked his instincts instead of charging ahead. My sister loosened her grip on control. She shared information freely now, without filtering or framing it first. And my parents. They looked at me with something that hadn't been there before. Trust. Not protective trust. Equal trust. One evening, months later, we were sitting together. Nothing urgent, nothing at stake. The conversation drifted, comfortable and ordinary. My mother said casually, "We're lucky you're the way you are." No explanation. No correction. Just acknowledgement. I didn't respond right away. Because in that moment, I realized something important. I hadn't proven myself by becoming louder, or tougher, or more like them. I'd done it by staying exactly who I was. Observant, patient, careful. The youngest sibling who was never taken seriously hadn't demanded respect. She'd outgrown their expectations quietly. And when the family needed her, truly needed her, she was ready. That was enough.